Good afternoon, and I would like to just start off by thanking Vector for this opportunity to talk to this great group of what I consider potentially influencers for some of the things we're going to talk about here. So let me find my switch here and see if I can figure out how to make things go. They said green goes forward. Hey, look at that, it does. Just there's more than one green button on here, but we'll get through that. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about something probably different. Unfortunately, I missed most of today's presentation due to some prior engagements. But we're going to speak a little bit about the aftermarket, where things are being worked on outside of the dealer network or outside of the OEM's direct influence. And so ETI is the Equipment and Tool Institute. And we're a not-for-profit. We have about 110 companies in our organization now. We've been around since 1947. Basically, right after the war, companies in the U.S. were asked to work together for the war effort, right? And when the war ended, they decided that cooperation was positive, that they liked working together, so they formed this institute, and that's really where it came from. It's certainly changed a whole lot over the years. But that was the real beginning of it. So basically, we have four main groups within ETI. We have what we call our scan tool group, which is about 70% of our members identify themselves as part of the scan tool group. We have a mechanical systems group, which would be people that make equipment like air conditioning equipment, battery service equipment, wheel service equipment. Then we have our collision repair group, folks that are involved mostly just in collision repair of the automobile, body panels, frame straightening, sectioning procedures, welding. Then we have our service information group, our smallest group, and these are the people that take OEM repair information and repurpose it so it's in a common standard format so that aftermarket shops have the access to it without having to learn each and every separate manufacturer's processes and going through their own service. So basically, our mission here, as it says, is to advance the vehicle service industry by providing technical data and open dialogue between the manufacturers of transportation products, government regulators, and providers of tools, equipment, and service information. My background, just quick on this one. Basically, I went to school too long, and I've been in the auto service industry even longer. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time, and because I'm old. All right, a lot of what we're going to talk about, because we're focusing on the electronics at this particular part of it here and the scan tool type information, repair information for the aftermarket, there's these key regulations and agreements that have been driving a lot of the standardization processes. Back in '85, it was the California Code. They had a real air pollution problem out there, and they started to try to do something about it. So they first created the 1968 Title III, which is really the California Air Resources Board, put together this thing, which most people kind of know now is OBD1. They didn't know it was going to be OBD1 at the time, but that's essentially what it is now. It was a whole 3 pages long. And anybody that knows this business and looked into these regulations now, they're a lot longer than 3 pages. So as they put it out, it was a way to get the ball started, but they instantly realized that they needed a lot more. So they started working on it right away, right after that initial thing, and they started putting together this thing that eventually developed into OBD2. And so that was really, and then the EPA also looked and seen what was going on. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency looked on what was going on in California and decided to start to adopt some of those standards for the whole nation, which is now being contested again, and we'll see what happens in the future. But essentially, what was going on in California was kind of being blessed by the Environmental Protection Agency, and that kind of became the regs for the 50 states. Because those of you old enough to remember, as old as I am, we used to have vehicles that were made 49 states or vehicles we could sell in California. And that was very difficult for the manufacturers to try and do, and nobody wanted to have 50 different regulations for 50 different states and have some way to do it. So EPA just says, okay, the toughest stuff out there right now is California, we're going to adopt that. Then there was a series of things that only regulated anything that had an effect on emissions. So is any sort of module that was a powertrain module or a transmission module or anything that would have some sort of effect on emissions, it had to be proven that it was by having a default or not having the information to repair that, it would have an effect on emissions. Well, quickly, our industry decided, well, we wanted to be able to fix the whole vehicle in a number of ways. And so there was first really the Dorgan letters back in 2002, where the manufacturers all signed letters saying that they agree to provide all the service information and all the information to be able to do basically what their dealerships could do. Then more recently, we got the Massachusetts right to repair stuff that went down in 2012. And then there was, that led to a nationwide memorandum of understanding in 2014, the right to repair MOU that's called. That basically also brought in some other aspects, but it essentially was kind of a right to repair issue. That is actually starting up again. There's another bill to amend that Massachusetts bill going on in Massachusetts right now. So basically the rule of thumb we've been living under, and we've kind of have an agreement with all the manufacturers we do business with, is that we should have the same capabilities, the aftermarket should have the same capabilities to repair the vehicles as their franchise dealers do. So when it comes to the scan tool information that I deal with, if the dealership scan tool can do a function, then the aftermarket scan tool, they should be able to provide that information so an aftermarket scan tool can implement the same features and do the same functions. They're also supposed to have access to all of the service tools that their dealerships have, access to the training that their dealerships have, and basically that's kind of the rule of thumb. Now there's not a lot of regulation, there's not a lot of legislation on this. This is a series of agreements that we've had with the manufacturers. Now you might ask, why would the manufacturers care at all about the aftermarket? Well, this is where you can see right now. In 2015, the Automotive Dealers, National Automotive Dealers Association, or NADA, did a study on automotive service in the United States. And they classified the service business in the United States as a $310 billion business. But yet only 85 billion of that 310 were being captured by their franchise dealers. So basically 2/3 of all service on your automobiles running around on these roads are being done outside of the dealership franchise networks. Many of the manufacturers that I deal with and talk to on a regular basis fully understand this, and they realize that they don't even have the capacity in their own dealerships to service their own fleets that they have on the streets. The bigger companies, the Fords, the GMs, the Toyotas, they know that there's no way that they can actually service all their vehicles. And many of those dealers, when you're there, they don't even want to see a vehicle come in the door that's over 10 years old. They don't have the parts for it anymore. Don't know how to, they're trained to work on those older vehicles. So they really like to see that stuff eventually. I don't know if they like to see it, but it's fine with them if that moves out of their network and into the aftermarket. So we also did a little study a while ago wanting to know what other effects that we have. And we did this study and it conducted a survey. And it was how many people asked their mechanic, I'm going to buy a new vehicle, what would you buy? To see if so the mechanics then say, well, I would not buy this vehicle because I can't work on it, but I'd buy these because A, I can work on it, I can get the information, the parts are relatively cheap, and I get support through the aftermarket network for it. And they found out that a lot of people took that advice and actually bought cars based upon the recommendations of their mechanics that they use. So basically, it's essential that tools and equipment used in the aftermarket are designed and built to fulfill the manufacturer's basic requirements. We need to make sure we're doing the proper job to fix it right the first time, as is the role of a franchise dealership. So really, the number one source of information for getting this data, especially in this room here, the scan tool type data, is the manufacturers package all that information up, they provide it to ETI, and then we disseminate it to our members. And this is done either through our tech weeks. We have 2 tech weeks a year, and we have meetings, direct meetings with all the manufacturers where we have engineer-to-engineer discussions over the service issues. And then all the manufacturers that provide data to us, some of them provide data to us every time they have a new release for their tool, might be 4 times, 5 times a year. Some provide us data just once a year for the next year's models. Here's all of our service information. When we get it, we take it and we store it in the Amazon Web Services Secure Service Cloud. We then let people know that it's there, our members are there, and they can securely log in, they can access this data. You know, we use a subversion system for the software that's brought back and forth on there. This is what it's been for a long time. Lately, a lot of the manufacturers are wanting to license this data, which is fine. The legislation that I referenced before allows the manufacturers to recover the incremental costs it takes them to package this information for the aftermarket, but not develop it the first time. So it's really only, they're not supposed to make a profit center out of it, and that was specifically stated in the legislation. But they can recover their costs. So there's a lot of manufacturers that want to license the data. We've set up licensing processes. We've sort through a lot of the licensing. We'll collect the money from the members that want to license the data. We do the contract work, insurance, and all that kind of stuff. We facilitate for a lot of the manufacturers that want to license their data instead of just providing it gratis, which quite a few still do. So how does all this work, really? Basically, it boils down to the importance of standards. If we didn't have the suite of standards and all the standards we got today, all of this would be almost impossible to do. So we work very diligently ourselves within ETI, but also all of our members, folks at Bosch and Snap-on and Hunter and on and on and on. Mala, they're all members of our association. They're the aftermarket groups that are building tools and equipment. They're involved in a lot of the standards organizations. Predominantly SAE and ISO are the main ones that we're spending a lot of time with. I think I'm on roughly 22 or 24 standards committees associated between SAE and ISO. So some of the key ones that we have is J1979, diagnostic services. That's the OBD messages. There's the standard on the diagnostic connector that we all have, the J1962 connector, and what pins are used and what baud rates need to be used on those pins. There's the diagnostics on CAN, the 15765 ISO document that works along side by side with 1979. There's the unified diagnostic services that's basically all the diagnostics that is beyond, 1979, the above 10 services. And those of you who are involved in diagnostics certainly know this very, very well. And then, of course, there's now the pass-through reprogramming J2534. But without these standards, we'd have very, very difficult time even given this information on being able to provide a product to work on multiple makes and multiple models. Here's just an example from 15765-4 that shows the complexity of these standards within ISO and SAE. They tried to do their best to position this with the OSI layers, although a lot of them cross over quite a bit. Many of these standards go back a long time before a lot of the developers in OBD were very involved in the OSI layers. But this is just an example of the complexity of the different standards and how many there are out there. One of the jokes in our industry is the good thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. Well, now we kind of have a shifting wind. This is where we're kind of what brought me here today. The long-established agreements we've had with the OEMs is worked very, very well for us for many, many years. The system is done good. We have the information. We can fix cars. Everybody's happy. But due to technology changes right now, we're facing some shifting winds. With emerging technologies, new stuff, cybersecurity, the data dilemma is bringing up new challenges in what we do. So this whole connectivity system, you've been probably hearing a lot about it today, I would imagine. It seems to be what we've been talking a lot about the last few years. And associated, what does it bring? Well, basically, there's a whole lot of radios on a vehicle, right, or ways to connect wirelessly, whether it's TPMS sensors that are using a wireless input, eCall in Europe, OEM telematics, like the first big one on the block, the OnStar type systems. The aftermarket telematics systems, these are the people that made these little, we call them dongles, and they plug into your OBD connector, and they do a lot of fleet management stuff or insurance tracking things for lowering your insurance. And now there's the ITS, or Intelligent Transport Systems, that are being slowly developed into a lot of the vehicles that will be used by governments and mandated by governments for the ITS world. And then there's other connectivity things with radar and LiDAR. Most of those are wired and connected, but some of those also have some wireless capabilities built into them. So really, what does that mean? What it means is there's a new challenge, and that challenge is security, cybersecurity. So basically it said here, some more little stats. By 2020, Toyota's expecting roughly 42% of the US vehicles to be equipped with cooperative automated driving technology. So either DSRC or maybe in the future 5G, we don't know. But, and then Intel, they just spoke here a little bit ago. These numbers are changing every day, just like anything else, but they're saying that, in a typical day, a vehicle that is automated might put out 4 terabytes of data that can be used for whatever purposes it's spewing that data out for. So basically they're saying it's all the Internet of Things. There'll be no border between home and vehicle. What you can do at home, you'll be able to do in your vehicle. The same type of connectivity you have. So with the connectivity, we all want it to be secure. We don't want our vehicles hacked. We don't want somebody manipulating your vehicle when you're driving it and doing things that you don't want it to do. So it's in all of our interests to have this security and cybersecurity built in, and we support that 100%. So one thing to bring up, though, we're not just saying it's an issue with the OEMs. It's an issue with our tools as well. The Department of Transportation a few years ago wanted to put one of these dongles on all of their fleet of vehicles so that they could track all of their vehicles and know where they're at and know who's driving them and know if they're being driven safe. So any vehicles owned by DOT was going to get connected. They purchased a bunch of these dongles from some of my members, and they looked at all of them and didn't find one of them that had built-in security that couldn't be hacked. So they said, we got a problem here. We're not going to go and put an attack point on every vehicle in the DOT. That's just stupid of us. So the industry has been reacting on our side, developing our own security systems and building in our own cybersecurity. And certainly the OEMs have been doing that as well. And the last speaker said about 10 years. I want to say it's only been about 5 years that many of the OEMs have taken cybersecurity very seriously. 5 years ago, almost every OBD connector on a vehicle had live CAN pins on it that you could go and do anything you want to do with it, with any radio you wanted to. It was pretty open range, very unsecure. Now they're all putting gateways on and finding new ways to kind of clamp things down a little bit, and that makes a lot of sense. The second little issue that we kind of run into now and then is this whole issue about data. Vehicle manufacturers are looking at a different future, as we all are. Nothing stays the same. And as we look at shared mobility and all the things that we've been talking about going forward, fleets and the urban migration where people are moving into cities where they don't even want to own a car because they don't have anywhere to park it or they don't want to pay the pricing to park it. Hate to say it, but buying a car is a bad investment. The minute you take it out of that dealership, it loses a lot of investment. You use it about 5% of the time. Your utilization is horrible. So a lot of the young, my kids, they don't even really want to own a car. They want to share a car, or they want to use Uber or Lyft or these kind of things, especially the ones that live in the urban environment that don't want to have to pay maybe $30,000, $40,000 a year to park your vehicle. So manufacturers are looking, there might not be a car or 2 cars in every garage anymore. And so we have to change a little bit what they're going to do. And if they're going to have sharing vehicles, there's going to be less cars built Possibly. There's still a debate there with the shared vehicles and the utilization maybe going up to 90%. There's going to be a lot more turnover vehicles, certainly a lot service, but done in a different environment than it is today. So they're looking at new business models, and they've looked to the tech industry. They've looked to like Google, and they looked to like Apple, and they looked to these people, Facebook, that are making a lot of money off of data. Data they're getting from me and you and anybody else, whether you know it or not. Every time you accept a little agreement on your software license, a lot of times what you're doing is giving somebody a whole lot of access to your data. And they're selling that data. They're monetizing it. So many of the automobile manufacturers are saying, we should be doing the same thing. We didn't do it for a long time. We let all these young guys build these devices and put in our car and offer services that we should do. So they're starting to do that. There was only a few that really started looking at that connectivity years ago, and now they're all looking at it. So there's sometimes a bit of a hesitation on their part to want to share that data because they want it for some reason. And then we have the big dilemma about what data are we talking about. So every time we get into a data dilemma, we always get into the war of, you're talking about my personal data, my phone numbers on my phone that's in there? No, that's not what we're talking about. So we have to kind of categorize the data. We're not talking about changing the calibrations in the ECU or any direct memory reads or writes. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this information, when I talk about data, needed to service and repair and maintain your vehicle. The same stuff we've been getting all along. Nothing new, nothing beyond that. So in Europe, there's been a big push to try and capitalize this data package by the thing they call the extended vehicle. It's a series of ISO standards. And their envision was they were going to redefine what the vehicle was. And the vehicle in my day was the a couple of doors, a couple of windows, 4 tires, engine, trans. That was the vehicle. They're redefining the vehicle now as more of an entity, which surrounds in the support entity, which includes servers that are on the OEMs, wherever the OEM servers are at, cloud servers that they're at. And their vision was that all data from the vehicle on a proprietary link and a secure, I'm sure secure, link to their server would only be to them. That data wouldn't be provided to anybody else. And if anybody else wanted it, they had to go license it from that manufacturer, and they would package up what you wanted to license and sell it to you. Well, the aftermarket didn't like this idea. You can obviously understand. They just didn't like that idea. And it's not that it wouldn't work if all the manufacturers played ball the same way, but we don't. We've got some manufacturers that are very easy to work with and understand the importance of the aftermarket, and we have some that look at the aftermarket as a complete enemy, and they don't want to share that data. So we have that battle. So what does ETI believe? Our association got all our people together and we had a toss, and basically we think a vehicle owner should have the right to decide who gets access to the data of the vehicle that they purchased. They should have right to decide who works on that vehicle. It shouldn't have to be somebody that was approved by the person that made that vehicle allowed to work on it. Once they bought it, they should have a right to take it to whoever they want to. The vehicle diagnostic data obtained by the service provider should come directly from the vehicle and not be processed through a third party for a fee. The vehicle manufacturer cannot designate who can or cannot service the vehicle they initially produced. And so basically we have a whole suite of, on our website, you can go dig up our document that's kind of our key principles on this issue. So I had to pretend I got a little physics here because I got a technical group here, but prevailing headwinds that we're talking about right now. For more than 25 years, SAE and ISO and ETI successfully worked on diagnostic protocol standards with the objectives that vehicle comply with regulations and that diagnostic tools can successfully be used to perform bidirectional communications for the purpose of performing diagnostics and repair, inspections, maintenance, and flash reprogramming. New implementations of security measures and diagnostic protocols have been designed to protect against unauthorized access and manipulation of communication between test equipment and vehicles. Many of these security measures require certificates or key-based algorithms that to allow access, and so there's authentication and authorization and levels that are being done on this. We agree that those processes need to be in place. We just want to think they can be done standardized, because here's the issue. The issue we see currently is these security measures are being developed unilaterally by every automaker implementing unique custom security solutions. We are currently in a situation where vehicle manufacturers implemented a security process right now, and we don't have any aftermarket tools that can be used on those vehicles. They've been working with us, and we've been working open with them, but as of a week or two ago, there's only one company that's signed up for it, and they haven't released their software to do it yet. So almost a year and a half, there's been no aftermarket tools be able to work on these modern some 18 and 19 vehicles. So with the potential for dozens of diverse implementations, the standardization efforts that we've worked on for so many years stands to be broken. We've taken the vehicle and we've standardized almost all the communications for diagnostics on that vehicle. And I don't mean standardized every PID that's not regulated. What I mean is it's all using the same basic UDS type services. We know how to use it. We know what it is. We've standardized the communication to off-board tools. We've standardized the off-board tool. And now we're putting a layer in the middle, a security layer that is not standardized and breaks the full chain that's been working. There's, you see my broken chain. So basically, what we're worried about is how do we navigate this? How do we have, right now there's roughly 22 manufacturers that an aftermarket person looks at and may choose to try and have diagnostics for. If he's got to figure out 22 different security methods, it'll be a nightmare. This is a current example of a current solution. And this is, I want to say that there's some issues we have with this, but for the most part, it's a pretty good solution. It's got a lot going for it. We just have some issues over governance and the user management system and the certificate handling that can be fixed. But essentially, you have a PKI certificate that's going out and it's going through a server that has been hired by the OEM. And the tool manufacturers connect their server to that server, and their tools then connect to the manufacturer of the tool server. Why did this have to take place? Many of the aftermarket scan tools out here on the end, these things are they're not computers, they're not PCs. Well, I could say they are computers. They're not Windows-based PCs. Many of them don't have web browsers on them. Many of them do have connectivity, because that's how they get updated. But they only can connect to their server that they were designated to, their manufacturer server. That's how they track information. That's how they update their software. But they don't have a browser where you can go in and just type in a URL and get a connection to it. They're also, most of them, less than 10% of aftermarket scan tools are Windows-based. Predominantly, you'll see a lot of Linux, home-baked operating systems, iOSs, Androids, because obviously the Windows software licensing issues and costs was something that they wanted to avoid in their tools. So what happens to the shop? A shop owner now has to register his tools. He has to go to the site, and he has to go in, and he has to register what tools he has. He has to pay a fee for his tools. He puts a serial number of all his tools in and assigns a person that is responsible for those tools. A lot of people don't like this because of another reason. I'll get to that in a minute. Here's kind of the overall process of the certificate handling between the OEM server, the bridge server, the vehicle, and the scan tool. No need to go into details on this. Hopefully you can get these copies if you want to. But a lot of this, I think, is it's pretty good. We have a lot of issues with that user management system and the certificate offering, but that's small in the scheme of things. So what were the initial aftermarket concerns? Because it's not what I thought it was going to be, funny enough. The big thing they had concerns was a third party affiliated with the manufacturer was going to know all of their customers and know all the tools they use. That was their number one big concern, that somebody was going to have access to their customer lists and a potential competitor, because the OEMs sell their own tools to the aftermarket. So they had a real lot of heartburn with this. This was probably the biggest thing that they had trouble with. And it's the thing we're working on now, is doing governance and privacy over the data that's collected in the user management system. The second thing we have issue with this one is you have to have a live internet connection every time you work on a vehicle. To start a diagnostic session on a vehicle, you have to have a live internet connection. Well, that can be problematic in some garages. It can be problematic more out of the garages. Here in Michigan, you don't have to get very far up into the upper of the hand there, and you don't have internet connection. So you can't work on that car. Your only choice is to get a flatbed, put it on there, and haul it to somewhere where you can get a connection. So we would like to see some sort of time-based certificate, which can be done. It can be done. It just isn't being done in the current situation. And of course, the last piece, data governance and privacy policy, is what we've been working on a lot. So as you think about this, as you're developing you're developing diagnostic software for a platform that you have for 20 auto manufacturers. And if you have to do a different system than what you've seen in there, a certificate handling system or a DLL that some OEMs use, that's, again, because it's a DLL, it can only be used on about 10% of the scan tools in the field because they're the only Windows-based ones out there, it's a real problem. And so what we want to do is what we're asking to do, and our call to action is let's standardize a process. We don't really like going through these changes because most of our industry simply doesn't like changes. Let's be honest with you. But we're accepting these changes. And we can accept some things that we don't like, but it would be a lot better if we could accept one thing we can all kind of get along with and kind of make work. That's what we're really asking for, is some standardization. So this is our headwind, our call to action. The standardization efforts are needed to enable the continual success of the aftermarket repair industry. Again, that's a over $200 billion industry right now, just in the US itself. The success of the aftermarket can be directly traced to the success of standardization efforts put forth and promoted by SAE, ISO, ETI, and a bunch of other associations. That's not the only ones. I just had to put ETI in there because that's who I represent. So we must continue that cooperative effort to make sure we don't abandon our customers, whether they are vehicle or tool manufacturers. Again, with roughly 70% of the service being performed outside of the automaker's franchise dealer network, we need to work together to make sure that our mutual customers are satisfied. And they will then go back and buy your product again if they have a good ownership experience. And that ownership experience, in many cases, means that you're going to get service outside of a dealer network. In parts of rural America, you might not have a dealer for hundreds of miles, but you got a garage in that city that you can go to. And if he can't fix your car, you're probably not going to buy that car again next time. So we feel it can only be accomplished through cooperation and standardization, and we're promoting that. So those of you that have that influence in here, that's all I'm trying to do is say, let's work together. Let's roll up our sleeves. There is a security system that can work. We promote the one that is being developed right now in ITS, in ISO TC204, Intelligent Transport Systems. We encourage many of the auto manufacturers in here to get involved in that effort. There's not a lot of automobile manufacturers involved in that effort, and I really would like to see more of that. In that, there is every bit of what we need already done and voted on and put in place, with the top-notch security systems, because these are communication that's going on from vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure. They're going to eventually brake your car, they're going to accelerate your car, they're going to tell your car where to go, what not to do. Because the ITS world in this whole thing as we move forward to control traffic flow, and not just traffic flow, commerce, trucks, boats, airplanes, containers, bicycles, motorcycles, all of that is an element in the ITS world. And we think what they've done in that ecosystem, we can adopt today to solve our problems on communicating wirelessly and wired. There's no reason to have a difference with a modern automobile today and give that security that everybody wants. Thank you.